Okay. Just waiting for it to start over here on this page. Hello. There we go. Okay. And that. There we go. I think we should be good. Okay. We're good there, and that's good, and there we go. Good morning. How are you doing? Might be evening, might be afternoon. It's hard to say. Depends on where you are. Here it's morning. It's bright and sunny, pretty hot. I mean, not right now. It's not that hot, but it's been hotter than June usually is around here. So there's that. Let's see. You got south of Sydney, Australia. Good morning from a sleepy Washington, D.C. Hello from sunny Ludwigshafen, Germany. Have to finish a report, but it's Maulerfiend time. Nice. Really interested about this topic. I don't have any Mdf Terrain, wondering how good they are. It kind of depends, but we'll get to that in a bit. Let's see here. Fair to warm. Limerick, England. Let's see here. Greetings from Toronto, the center of the universe. Wow. Belgium. Let's see. Top of the morning to you. Good morning. And from Hudson, Illinois, we got Portugal, we got London, we got Montreal. Swelteringly sunny Bristol. It's hard to say swelteringly. I don't know why. It's difficult for me, at least. Got New Mexico. We got regular Mexico. I'm not even going to attempt the name of the city there. Rochester, New York. We got Plymouth. Castleberry, Florida. Prussia. Gothenburg, Italy. Salt Lake City. I've been there. Good morning from a very sunny Cincinnati. How are you, Adam? I'm doing okay. Allergies are a little, but otherwise okay. What is MDF? MDF is medium density fiberboard. I'm not quite sure exactly what it stands for, but it's this kind of fibery, sort of slightly wooden kind of board. It's not like wood taken from a tree. It's like all powdered up and then glued together again, or some sort of process. But you see it a lot in terrain these days because it can be easily laser cut. So that's kind of the big thing. Is it's usually laser cut MDF is what it's generally known as. So if you have a laser cutter, then you can cut it out, and then you can start a business and start selling it and stuff like that. You're shipping it, in some situations very far, and stuff can be kind of heavy, but it is flat, so that's kind of a benefit there. So it's like a flat. It's almost like the IKEA of terrain, a little bit. Hello from Rockford, Newfoundland. Medium density fiberboard. See, I wasn't sure about that. Singapore, Connecticut. Need to build some more ruined buildings, but I'll likely build out of scavenged styrofoam. Yeah, and I'm going to be doing some, probably not so much styrofoam, but I am going to be doing some terrain building with that pink foam that they put on the outside of the houses in cold parts of the country, like where I live. It's also known as XPS foam. It's not like the white styrofoam with the little balls in it. When you break it apart and you get those little. This is pink, and it's very small, tiny little cellular kind of stuff. Sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's green, but usually it's pink. And so, yeah, there's that. Antarctica. Antarctica. I think there's like a letter missing there, but I think you're probably sure. New Zealand, Netherlands, England. Hello from Ypsilanti. I think I'm spelling that or saying that right, but Kansas City. That one's easy. Let's see here. I varnish with a rattle can, and on the can it says to avoid high humidity. Living in a region that tends to have high humidity. What is considered high humidity for these purposes? Sometimes it'll say on the can. If it doesn't, then I would definitely always test it on something before you spray a model that you like a lot, that you spent a bunch of time on. High humidity is, like I said, relative. Might be 70 plus, might be 80 plus, percentage-wise. But yeah, definitely I would always, if you're even a little bit concerned, always test it on something, and it doesn't matter what it is, and see if it gets like a weird frosty kind of like look to it or something, and then there you go. Jason Tick, how you doing? MDF sounds like what I needed. Instead, I got hard placemat shaped boards that take 20 cuts to slice through. MDF is hard to cut through without using a laser, kind of. It can be. So there's that. Shipley, Florida. Got my physical copy of Rain and Hell. I am assembling my first Cabal. Nice. Good to hear it. Good to hear it. Hopefully, we should be able to have the print version back online. I would love to say Tuesday. I'd love to say last week, but no. So just a quick note about what happened with the print version. So there were some issues as far as there were some typos and things like that, which are, that happens. And there was two little bits. There was a chart where there were two things that were switched, but if you read through the actual listings of each of the devout, they were proper there. It's just the chart was goofed up. So if you ignored the chart, you wouldn't have noticed. And then there's a scenario at the end of the book called The Beast, and the stats for the Beast were missing. So we have now produced a PDF that you can download direct from the website that has the replacement for that page. We've also updated the PDF version of the game, which is instantaneous. You update it and boom, everybody sees the new one. It's great. But then we wanted to update the print version, which means you send a special PDF that you've had to lay out to be for print, and it's a whole thing. And the people at Wargame Vault said, yeah, no, that won't, because it has to go through a process. They have to okay it with some software. Then the printer has to okay it with some software. And then they have to print a proof and mail it to me. And then I have to look at it with my eyes and go, yes. And then it can be okayed. It's a process. But previous to launch, that process didn't take nearly as long as it did this time. So we said, if we upload this, is it going to screw up the current print version to make it so that people can't buy it? And he's like, no, it shouldn't. Well, it did. So it's been, let's see, as of tomorrow, it will be 2 weeks since this mess. And I'm trying to be nice. So yeah, previously when we would go through the process to get a proof, it went way faster. And then after launch, it just took forever. And we're not real happy about it. So anyway, in theory, hopefully, I haven't got a shipping notice yet, but I hope I get one tomorrow. I better get one tomorrow. And we paid $92 to get it shipped overnight, so it should show up hopefully on Tuesday. But we'll see. Anyway, that's the end of my complaining about that, hopefully for at least a little while. If you follow me on not Instagram, well, I'll probably post about it everywhere actually, but if you follow me on Twitter, or if you follow Snarling Badgers, at Snarling Badgers, the Snarling Badger Studios Twitter, you'll find out as soon as we know that it can go live again. And then if you're interested in buying a print version, it'll be available, but for right now, it's a thing. So anyway, hello from Germany. Afternoon from Worcester. My first live show for a few months working on my Cursed City skeletons. Have you painted them? And if so, how did you do the banner? I did paint them. I did the banner. I did not freehand anything on the banner. I just kind of painted it sort of like I don't want to say a pale purple, but kind of a bleached kind of pale purple. I did everything in Zenithal highlights with them. And then, I actually, if you go onto Twitch, or if you follow me on Twitch, I painted the Cursed City skeletons on Twitch, so you could check them out there. Some more greetings from Germany. My Rain and Hell book arrived this Friday, printed in UK, shipped to Berlin. Nice. Or Berlin, sorry. We have two cities here in Wisconsin that are, there's a Berlin, Wisconsin, and there's a New Berlin, Wisconsin. But, because there's a lot of Germans here. A lot of Germans emigrated here to Wisconsin. So they used to be called Berlin, and then I think after World War II, then all of a sudden, I don't know, there was no spelling change or anything, but it's now just pronounced Berlin. So it's anyway. But yeah, so that's sometimes I see the word and then I say the wrong one. Sunday night in Thailand, getting ready to build my Cabal. Nice. I saw Wargames Atlantic have released a box of lizardmen that would be my long-awaited space lizards with lasers. My prayers have been answered. Yes, they're nice. I ordered a box of those lizardmen from Wargames Atlantic, and I like them quite a bit. MDF sounds like the kind of music I listened to in college as a KMFDM, I think is what that is. Let's see here. Supposedly you mix water with white glue to use that to seal it before priming so it doesn't suck up so much paint into the fiber. Painting MDF is a little tricky, and that is part of the issue is because it can soak in. Like if you paint, just like with a paintbrush on MDF, it will soak into the fiber a bit, and then it will need another coat. So the official answer is to generally do that, either a little bit of white glue, PVA glue mixed in with some water, and you spray it on there and all that kind of stuff. That is kind of a hassle. But the other answer was given to me by the owner of Death Ray Designs, whose name is Austin. And Austin told me to use a spray can filler primer, basically Ralcan filler primer from, I think he was saying Rust-Oleum was the kind that he likes to use. And so, yeah, you spray, and you get like gray or whatever. You spray that on there first, and as a filler primer, it then seals the MDF, and then you can paint over the top of it and all that kind of stuff. So that's a lot easier than mixing glue and all that kind of stuff. But, it's up to you. If you've already got a whole bunch of glue and some squirt bottles and all that stuff, there you go. But otherwise, I just used the stuff that I've always painted. I've always used filler primer. And I did a video about painting MDF years and years ago. So if you go onto the YouTube channel, do a search for MDF, you'll find that video. I painted a bunch of post-apocalyptic buildings from Death Ray Designs, actually. Yeah, now I can think of it. Did you take the opportunity to fix the typos? Yes, that was that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have bothered updating it if we weren't fixing the typos. We fixed the typos. Howdy from Baldwin, Wisconsin. Working on a couple of Predator tanks today. Nice. Let's see here. Got my limited collector edition a few days ago. Indeed, the version with some typos and the goofed up stuff. That's the limited collector version. It's true. Hello from Sarawak. Painting my miniatures to distress. Got the PDF too, but I'm an old dinosaur that just likes physical copies. I'm generally a PDF guy. Like, I like having a whole bunch of PDFs on my iPad. There are times when the physical copy is nice too. A game that I just bought recently from Wargame Vault. A game that I just bought recently from Wargame Vault is a game called Space Weirdos, which I really think is fun. It's a great thing. And as I was looking at the PDF, and I'm like, that aspect ratio looks not 8.5 by 11. It looks thinner. And that's when I did a little bit of searching and realized that and it's also a 16-page book, and 16 pages is very specific because that's 4 times 4. What that means is that this was designed to be printed in a little booklet like this. And with Adobe, you can tell it, hey, print out this PDF, and there's a little button you can click to say booklet, and then you have to click a bunch of other stuff to make it work. But then I was able to print out this little booklet for Space Weirdos, and it has all of this stuff in there, and then you just put it together, fold it, and I have a little booklet stapler because I'm that kind of nerd. And so, yeah, so I've made my own fun little, but I also like having it on PDF as well. So, yeah. Hey, Moderator Matt, how you doing? Remember when KMFDM and Industrial as a whole sounded futuristic? I do. Haven't seen the Wargames Atlantic models in any local shops yet, but I'm hopeful a little indie game store in my city will have some this summer. Yeah, I mean, they're based out of the UK, so if you're in Sean Ashley Smith, you're in Canada, aren't you? So that's going to be a bit of a trek. But, yeah, I ordered mine, and then it took, not quite a month, but it took a while to get to me. Knights of Dice. Hello from Melbourne. Being an MDF terrain manufacturer, I'm keen to hear your thoughts. Nice. Yeah, I mean, I like MDF. I have a bunch of it currently that I'm planning on using for some different boards and things like that. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. But yeah. Foregrounds are pre-painted, modular, magnetic. Magnetic? I've not heard that before. MDF terrain is the freaking truth. I do like some pre-painted stuff. What they're doing is they're not, well, it's not that they're not painting it. They're basically kind of coating different parts in different colors so you don't have to if you don't want to. And one of the manufacturers I'm going to talk about in a little bit here also has that same sort of situation, but the two other manufacturers, they don't just give you the unpainted stuff. The pre-painted stuff is nice, but I still need to weather it personally. I think it looks better when it's weathered. Let's see here. Monkey Bits guy here, working on more Monkey Bits while listening in. Nice. Say I had some random demon-type models kicking around that were bird-themed and which focused on magic and trickery. What would be the most appropriate philosophy for use in their cabal? It's not so much as a faction. So, like, birds and trickery, I mean, you could maybe go with, like, the Demented, potentially. I could see that. That might not be a bad idea. He has the booklet stapler for the ska zines. Man, I wish I did. That'd be awesome. When I grow up, I want to be a space weirdo. Well, I mean, for $4.99 over at Wargame Vault, you totally can. It's a really super fun little sci-fi skirmish game, and I'm really enjoying just going through it and building stuff, and I'm looking forward to playing it. But it's got it's called a heartbreaker, a skirmish heartbreaker, and a heartbreaker in RPG terms is when you sit down and go, I'm going to fix Dungeons and Dragons, and so you just make basically Dungeons and Dragons. You just fix all the stuff that annoys you, and then you have to change a bunch of wording and stuff like that, obviously, because you get copyright problems or whatever. And then you produce it generally very, very indie like this, and that's what a Heartbreaker is known, from what I've been told. But this is a skirmish Heartbreaker in that he's basically just taking a bunch of different pieces from some different games that he likes and squishing it all together and then making a thing. But it's a really fun little system. Hello, Uncle Adam, putting together Elfane Soul Raid now, the Crab Warband. Ooh. My girlfriend wants to play Warcry with. Nice. A little crab nose going on. That's fun. I made 2 pieces of simple terrain for my in-progress game project, and it ruined my box cutter's blade. I'll probably need help to make more. I mean, yeah, like, again, if you're trying to cut MDF, it's a tough one without, like, lasers or, that kind of stuff. The thing about laser cut MDF is it smells like burnt wood, which is sort of nice, up until a point. With magnetic, I mean it has a magnet included that lets you stick together differently for each game. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. I've watched your streams before, but never live. I'm just noticing that the guitar case behind you looks like a shocked robot. That is by design. It's not a guitar case. It's actually a cello case. It's my wife's cello case. And he didn't used to have googly eyes, but then viewer VJ Morph mailed googly eyes from Australia. So those are special Australian googly eyes. And they're Velcroed on there, and so then my wife was like, "Sure, you can put those on there." And so now, that's his name is Nick Raimondo. It's a long story, but yeah, that's he's my sidekick here for the live shows. Charlie Foxtrot Models makes some great MDF kits here in the UK. Love World War II stuff. Not heard of Charlie Foxtrot. See, that's gonna be interesting too, because there's a bunch of different manufacturers out there that I don't know of. I mean, really, in the grand scheme of things, the thing that you need most to do laser cut MDF is a laser cutter. I mean, and some MDF, but you can get that. So you can kind of start like as a smaller kind of cottage industry, and then maybe you ramp up and make it a full-time thing, like Blacksite Studios, like Death Ray Designs and stuff like that. So yeah, I kickstarted Space Weirdos and a few other during Zine Quest this year. About the only Kickstarter I do anymore. Yeah, I didn't even know there was a Kickstarter for it. I didn't actually discover Space Weirdos until I was hanging out on Wargame Vault a lot. After our game launched, the Casey Garsky is the name of the person who made that game, Space Weirdos, and it came out maybe a week later after our game, or maybe even a couple days later. And I just was like, oh, I like that cover. That's a lot of fun. And then I was just kind of looking at it, and I'm like, oh, I'll spend $5, and I've really enjoyed it actually. Can Chaos Marines work for Rain in Hell? I'm thinking of grabbing some of the lucky dips and painting them just for fun. I mean, you can use literally whatever you want. Chaos Space Marines would work better than, say, regular Space Marines. Again, it's your game, so you can do, you can proxy whatever you want, or you can play whatever you want. There's on the Facebook group, we've been seeing a lot of people doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and it's been very cool. But yeah, I mean, Chaos Space Marines, like I said, I think would work a little bit better because they're a little bit more chaosy, or whatever. But yeah, you can totally do that. Do Australian googly eyes spin the opposite way? I believe so, yes. I think so. My favorite MDF company is Brutal Cities. Those designs look like real cities, dystopian concrete cities. That's one of the companies I'll talk about as well, too, because I ordered a bunch of stuff from them towards the end of last year. So, yeah. MDF, also known as wood felt. Got a bunch of MDF terrain I ordered from Miniature Scenery out of Australia that are a bunch of really cool designs. Shipping wasn't too expensive or long either, but I live in the U.S. See, mine took a good long while, but that's okay. Our boy Dan at Tectonic Craft Studios also does good work. Absolutely, yeah. Dan, from Tectonic Craft. We see him at a bunch of local conventions. He used to be out east, living out east, and now he's recently moved to Wisconsin or Minnesota, right near the western side of Wisconsin, I think. My favorite MDF Terrain companies are TT Combat, who seem to be very well known over in the UK. Yep. Art of War Studios and War Mill. See, I haven't heard of those last two, I don't think. There is no shooting in Rain and Hell, though, so Bolt or CSM are kind of out. I mean, you can still use them if you want to. It's just that they don't. There's nothing to shoot, you know. So yeah, you may want to stick with more chainswords and stuff like that. Obviously, I really enjoyed TT Combat's MDF Terrain, but interested in hearing about other makers today. Absolutely. Shout out for Uncertain Scenery MDF Terrain, superbly designed. I think that that's the issues with some terrain companies, MDF Terrain, is that sometimes they like really hide the joins pretty well, and I think that makes the stuff look better. This image that I used in the title card here, I believe this stuff is from Black Site Studios, and they're one of the companies that pre-colors their MDF. But you'll notice along the corners there, you know, on those buildings where you got that kind of bricky thing, that's kind of helping to hide some of the MDF kind of joins on the corners. Now, between floors, you'll notice that there's definitely like a dark brown line over there on the right side and that kind of stuff, you know. So you can't hide all of it. But in some situations, different companies do a pretty good job about hiding the joins, and then that makes this stuff not look so kind of telltale MDF. It sort of depends, too, on whether it's MDF that you want to take apart and put back together again, like if you want to store it flat, or if you want to glue it together and keep it built all the time. I've found some companies do better making stuff that you have to glue together, and other companies will do stuff that you can kind of slot together and then take it apart later, but then it looks more slotted together. You know what I mean? Got lots of Orc and Necron terrain from TT Combat, massive range and local to me in the UK. Nice. Isn't all the Hobby Zone stuff for organizing your hobby desk made out of MDF? A lot of stuff like that is. A lot of I have a rack down in the basement for putting paint pots in, stuff like that, and that's MDF as well. Got any advice for actually making a skirmish game? My current rule set is a grand total of 4 pages long. I don't think there's anything wrong with going short, you know. I mean, heck, the original Age of Sigmar was 4 pages long, you know what I mean? First edition. I'm pretty sure 3rd edition won't be, you know what I mean? But yeah, I think there's something interesting to be said about making something kind of small and simple. And then if you're going to, you know, produce it, then produce it so that you can, like, there's like no artwork in here. You know, there's like some photos here and there to show you stuff, you know, that kind of thing. But there's really no artwork in here, which saves you money on an art budget for sure. And again, when it's a small little, I mean, there's artwork in the cover, obviously, and this is actually, it's great artwork. I really love the cover. I actually had a conversation with Casey over Facebook. I tracked him down, and I was like, this needs to be a shirt, and I need to buy it. But yeah, we'll see. So, like Vince and I have been talking, we're already talking about a little bit here and there. We're still working on the current game, and, you know, we're going to be producing a solo / co-op, at least I'm pretty sure on the co-op, but definitely the solo kind of free PDF campaign add-on, which will give you, I think right now we're between 4 and 6 new scenarios that you use to play co-op or solo. You can't really play most of the current, well, the Beast you can play solo, but all the rest of them you can't really play solo, and we can't make a set of rules to make an enemy cabal work like AI, you know, like, you see what I'm saying? Like, the cabals are there's a lot of stuff going on, there's a lot of density, there's a lot of, you know, titles and relics and essences and all this stuff, so there's no good way to write a set of rules that is like, oh, this is how it works. But to play a solo campaign or even co-op, your warband, your cabal versus a bunch of different beasts, a bunch of different monsters, a bunch of different, like, relatively more simple things to fight against, but probably more of them. That's kind of where we're going with that. But that'll be coming hopefully end of the month or beginning of July. So we're still working on that. But my point is that we have started talking a little bit about the next game, because we're hoping to produce about a game a year. And we're both in the mind of like, we're not going to say absolutely we're going to stay at 64 pages, which is what the current one is, but we don't want to go a lot longer. We just don't want to go down that road and go super huge. We want to stay relatively small as far as book sizes. Because we both got day jobs and, side businesses with our video channels on YouTube and such. So, yeah, it's just... and the thing is for a skirmish game, if you throw me a skirmish game and it's like a couple hundred pages, I'm like, that's a lot, really. You know what I mean? So that's why we're sticking with that. Hey, Christopher Dick, how you doing? Haven't seen you in person in a while, but hopefully soon. I'll be going to Gen Con in mid-September. Looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to getting back into conventions, I gotta be honest. Could you repeat the type of primer for Mdf Terrain? You're looking for something called filler primer. It's usually a spray that you can put on. It usually comes in gray. I don't know if you can get it in other colors. But filler primer. The stuff that Austin from Death Ray Design suggested, I think, was made by Rust-Oleum. So Rust-Oleum filler primer. And you kind of spray it on several light coats. Don't go heavy because it'll just... So several light coats, and that'll help to seal the MDF enough that when you put paint on it and stuff like that, it won't soak in like it usually does. Feature creep happens in skirmish games to keep things fresh, yeah. I had some designed to hold a brush washing jar and it rotted because there was water in the jar. Yeah, that's the one thing about MDF is you don't want to get it wet too much. That's the thing. That's one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of the glue and water spray that you put onto the MDF, because I'm concerned about the water, frankly. That's why I like using the filler primer instead. What paint/color do you use to paint the edge of bases? What's the current trend on that? I know it isn't Goblin Green anymore. I just did a video about that on YouTube, like seriously, like less than a month ago, about painting base rims. I personally prefer black, but, lots of people use lots of different things. And there were a lot of people in the comments that talked about the different ways that they do it. Some people change base color depending on, or the rims on, depending on the squad that they're painting. Maybe they have 3 different squads of the same guy, so they just keep the rims different colors so that they know who's who. Some people change things up every single miniature they paint, and that's fine too. And then you got people like Vince, who believes you can paint the rims any color you like as long as it's black. I personally prefer black, but I am fine with you folks doing what you want to do. I have a friend who works for a shop making MDF kits. I've never been sold, however, even painted, it still looks like MDF to me, unfortunately. In some situations it can, sure. Thought experiment, design a co-op game that is not soloable. Interesting. Any plan on games being compatible? The games that we make, not probably, because I think each game is going to be very different than the last. We have the ideas that we kind of have rolling around currently. We've got at least the next 3 to 5 ideas already kind of like, I don't want to say like written down. Well, okay, they're written down, like just very super brief synopsis, 2 sentences. Hey, a game like where you do that, that kind of thing. The next game is actually something that is kind of a Vince kind of idea. Rain in Hell was basically more my idea, and I came to Vince with it and stuff. The next game is more of a Vince idea, which would make you think that it was going to be predominantly Tzeentch or Slaanesh or whatever, but it's not. It's totally, it's not. Anyway, but they're not going to be compatible because there's not anything. And the thing is that, like, it was funny because when we launched the game, when we launched Rain in Hell, like literally on the first day in the comments for that video, people were like, cool, when's the first expansion? And we're like, you don't... I feel bad sometimes because I feel like Games Workshop has trained us all that you need to have expansions to everything instantly, and I don't, no. So like, we are technically doing an expansion, but like I said, it's going to be a free PDF just to basically get solo play and I think co-op as well out there for people who just don't have people to play with or are still concerned about the pandemic and stuff like that, because you live in a country where the vaccine rollout has not been as quick as it has been here, which we understand. Or you just like playing, by yourself sometimes. which is also cool. Or you want to play it by yourself before you start playing with people, so you feel more comfortable with the rules, that kind of stuff. That's also great. So anyway, yeah, we're going to do that, but that's not expansion because we're not like charging for it. But like I said, next game is going to be something different, and then the next game after that's going to be something different, and that's the way we kind of look at it. We don't really want to do like we're like this is the star that we've hitched our wagon to, and we're going to keep riding it into the ground. I may have mixed my metaphors there, but yeah, you know what I mean. Do you find any differences between the types of MDF, such as lightweight or low formaldehyde? I guess I've not come across the differences, so I don't know, actually. I don't know a ton about MDF specifically, like not the science or whatever. I've used shellac to pre-seal MDF, but filler primer sounds like it will save me a step. Yeah, I mean, I could see, is shellac a lot like Mod Podge? Is that the same kind of stuff a little bit, or something near it? Because I've also seen people use that as well. Mod Podge. Is it Mod Podge or Mod Podge? Mod Podge. There's a jar over it, like right over there, actually, because I just bought some recently. But yeah. Hello from Helena, Montana. It's a beautiful day, but I can only drop in and say hi because I am at training. Well, thank you, Patty's Parlor Games. I appreciate it. I spent half this week printing sheets of Greeblies on a 3D printer to use on MDF, cardboard, foam core, other terrain. Greeblies can really help settle the look. Absolutely. So when people are like, I don't know what's a Greebly. Okay, so like think of like Star Wars, right? You see the giant honking spaceships like the Star Destroyers and stuff like that, and they're covered with weird junk, right? They're just covered with pipes and electrical junction boxes and all this stuff. In modeling, for whatever reason, those things are known as Greeblies. And back in the 70s, when they made those movies, all those pieces were from other model kits. So you'd buy like a bunch of World War II like model kits of different sizes, you know, and all kinds of junk like that. And then you would just cover the outside of these spaceships with all this stuff to give it all this crazy detail. Now, in the grand scheme of things, spaceships would probably be smoother. And as you got into stuff like Star Trek and whatnot like that, the spaceships were smooth. They're like, you know, well, Star Trek came before Star Wars, but it was a visual choice to do with Star Wars. How does this all relate to what I'm talking about? Well, when you build yourself a piece of terrain, maybe it's MDF, maybe it's you take two pieces of foam core and you make a ruined corner and you put like a floor in it. I mean, like, we've all seen that piece of terrain on pretty much every 40K board, the ruined corner of a building. And that's great. It's a classic thing. But if you look at real buildings, there's stuff stuck on them. There's conduits, there's electrical junction boxes, there's air conditioning units, there's all kinds of just stuff stuck on the outside of buildings, stuff stuck on the outside of your house probably as well. And when you don't have that stuff on a piece of terrain, and then it doesn't look like real terrain, it looks like, oh, that's a couple of pieces of foam core, you know, and they painted it gray, and there you go. So a little bit of embellishment is, I think, a really cool idea. And you are starting to see some people who are making different pieces of embellishment, like that you can print yourself, or maybe like I know TT Combat sells like vents, you know, like little resin vents that you can glue to the outside of your terrain, or like little hatches and just stuff like that to make these things look a lot more real. And then it just makes your MDF terrain, your foam core stuff that you made yourself from scratch, whatever, it just makes it look more believable as an actual tiny little building and not just couple of pieces of foam core stuck together. So it's really cool. And I think that hopefully more people will start to do that to the pieces of terrain that they build. Even if it's MDF stuff that you bought, you can still put a bunch of extra stuff on it to make it your own, you know, which is very cool. What about Rain and Hell Workshop as a company idea? Do a mass fantasy battle game and a sci-fi version. No, I don't think. I mean, like, first of all, well, I don't really enjoy playing mass fantasy battles. I don't like playing big army games in general, so there's not really much of a chance of that. And a sci-fi version, I don't know. I mean, like I said, each game's going to be different. So you buy this game, and then then you buy another game. And again, like, I don't expect there to be big expansions. And for something like Space Weirdos, I expect this to be a fun game that I can play. And then next time we get together, if we play a campaign, then we'll play something else, and then we'll play. I mean, I think that's the thing too that Games Workshop has sort of trained people on to some degree. And I'm not saying this is bad. It's just part of their business model is that they're like, no, you don't play miniature games. You play 40K or you play Age of Sigmar, and that's the game that you play. And I think that, like, the way that the industry started was people playing a lot of different stuff. We play this for a while, we play this for a while, we play this, we hop around. And when the games are miniatures agnostic, then very frequently, if you're playing your cards right, you can use a lot of these models in this game and then these models in that game or whatever and that kind of stuff. Obviously, with the demon theme that we've got with Rain and Hell, those are probably not models you're going to necessarily put right into a sci-fi game, but maybe they're the monsters in a sci-fi game later on. You know, that's why you kind of go through your, when you play a lot of miniatures agnostic stuff, you have, the first thing you do when you pick up a new game is you go through your collection and figure out what can I use in here. And then if you find that there's maybe not as much, or there's some things you can use, but you're also trying to fill out your warband, cabal, group, crew, whatever, then you get to build some new stuff, and then you have the creativity of doing that. Or you decide, I'm going to completely start from scratch. Like, I'm going to do a couple of from scratch groups for Space Weirdos, but I've also got a bunch of models that'll just easily fit into that particular type of game, because it's sci-fi. You know, it's not that hard. Non-solo co-op, I think, would be like a partner card game like Euchre or Bridge. Did I say Euchre right? I don't know if I did or not. The key to making it not soloable is a lack of knowledge of your partner's resources being a requirement. I could see that, sure. Shellac is a lacquer sealer that is made from the shell of the lac bug. I realize it sounds like I'm making this up. As soon as I read that first sentence, I was like, that sounds made up. And so let's say we'll take it. I'll agree. Oh, but see, somebody else here is saying that shellac is crushed up resinous shells of the lac beetle suspended in alcohol. Interesting. So it's probably not the same stuff as Mod Podge. That makes sense. George Lucas was putting Greeblies through customs and he needed to label them, so he made the word up. Interesting. I did not know that. Let's see here. MDF is a certain look and feel. It's an aesthetic choice, but also a functional choice. You can design it so that there's no wobbly figure syndrome, but by doing that, it also makes the game look static. Sure, when you use really super detailed stuff, well, although I gotta be honest, there's a lot of detailed stuff coming out of MDF as well. It kind of depends on who's doing it, and it also depends on the type of architecture, which, let me talk about that real quick. So let me push this button, which is going to be scary, and then I'll do this, and I'll do that. Okay, so this is a company called Brutal Cities. They're based out of Australia, and I bought a bunch of stuff from them towards the end of the year. So brutalism is a type of architecture. If you think of like Eastern European kind of architecture, a lot of concrete, a lot of big blocky buildings, you think of maybe Soviet-era stuff, that's what brutalism is. And these are very cool. It's a so this is a relatively new company as well. So they've only been around about a year. So like you see stuff like this big huge plaza tower. This is $200 American, right? But it's pretty massive. If you see down there at the bottom, get out of here with that. Down here at the bottom, those are 28mm figures. So if you think about, like, that's like a Space Marine running around down there at the bottom, like that's literally a Death Watch. So that's a Death Watch guy. You can see that this building is about, oh geez, I don't know what, 2 feet tall, maybe bigger. Like, so that's and that's what brutalism looks like. It's just big concrete block stuff, which actually works quite well for MDF because MDF is obviously quite square. You don't have a lot of curved surfaces in MDF. From what I understand, the person who started this company went to school for architecture and was a fan of brutalism and decided to go with that route. So I think that's pretty cool. But then there's also, here's a weird little capsule tower, which again is kind of a brutalist sort of thing, but it's, I don't know, it's just very interesting. Still kind of sci-fi looking. I think I ordered... Let's see, did I order the Institute? I don't remember if I did, but I do also like this building a lot too. Again, just very square. Even a little bit of work on the top up here where you've got like some things that kind of look like air conditioning units and stuff like that. There are companies out there, Elric Hobbies is one of them I can think of, that makes like resin air conditioning and HVAC and stuff like that, stuff to add to your terrain. And I've bought some of their venting before, which because it's pretty cool. But they also have this kind of, they add this kind of stuff on the outside of the building too, which is smart. Like that's what makes a building look like a building a little bit more than you know, than just like, oh, here's another square thing or whatever. Let's view all, shall we? And they've been getting into some cyberpunk stuff, so they got some cool decals that you can stick on your buildings and things like that, which is sort of interesting. What else? But yeah, this is, I think, this is something that is taking the very blocky kind of square part of MDF and using it as a benefit. You know what I mean? Like this stuff to me looks real, kind of. You know what I mean? And you know, I've seen buildings like this. Heck, my high school was almost built this way a little bit. Like my high school was a little brutalist. But yeah, it's some cool stuff, and it also gives it a fun sci-fi look to it as well. But I can also use this stuff for a game like Zona Alpha, which is kind of sort of taking place in like maybe something vaguely Eastern Bloc or something kind of Soviet or something like that. And so that's, I think, really cool too. But yeah, so Brutal Cities is really interesting. They've also got bundles and stuff like that. But yeah, like I said, it took a good amount of time to get here from Australia. But you know, it was also late 2020, so everything was slow. So it's not the end of the world. There's a company called, I think it's called Every Little War, I believe. And Every Little War has this really smart plan where what they do is they work with companies, let's say in Australia and things like that, and then they get the laser cut files from, let's say, a company like Brutal Cities. I don't think they work with Brutal Cities yet, but maybe they will eventually. But they're an American company that just says, cool, we're going to pay you for the file, and then we will cut the laser stuff here, and then that way it won't have to get shipped all the way from the other side of the planet, and then we will give you royalties or whatever. And I know they've worked with another Australian one, Miniature Building Authority? No, Miniature Building Authority does resin. I forget who they work with, but they work with a couple different companies that are all like overseas, and then they can sell them to the American market, and then, you know, these companies are still getting money and whatnot. It's a smart business because, again, really the laser cutting is the important part, and it can be done wherever. It's kind of like if you were like, well, if you want to buy the 3D printed stuff that I sell, you can only buy it direct from me. You can't buy the STLs. A lot of companies are just like, we'll sell you the STLs and then we don't have to ship anything. You know what I mean? And it's also, we have an infinite number of STLs that we can sell. This particular copy, we can sell it a million times. It doesn't matter. It won't cost us anything extra, all that kind of stuff. So it makes a lot of sense. All right. So I've got some other ones too here real quick. Black Site Studio is a company that they're one of the companies that does the pre-colored stuff. So, like this building here, right? This building already comes in red and the green and the tan and the gray, and then you put it all together, and then boom, you've got a finished building. And they're hiding a lot of the MDF-ness by the brick texture on the sides. You see it here in the corner, the way this building fits together, that brick texture kind of hides the joins. And again, you know, it's very difficult, if not nearly impossible, to make cool curvy buildings with this. But to make stuff that looks kind of a bit more realistic, it's not hard. It's not bad. And this, well, it doesn't say how much it costs. Oh, it says it's $85, but it's big. This is a big building. I mean, here you can see there's a 28 millimeter guy on the roof. I mean, it's a big building. And they have a lot of different scales that they do here at Black Site Studios as well. I've purchased this city storage building, and I purchased some, because this is just a nice little extra building to have in a game like, let's say, again, Zona Alpha, just sitting over in the corner. I bought some of these concrete walls. These are nice. And again, pre-painted. Now I'm going to weather them up with my airbrush and a little bit of this and that, but yeah, it won't be hard. It'll be pretty quick. And I also bought a building that is broke. They also have this giant honkin', they're out of stock right now, but they have these huge oil tankers, kind of, or whatever, you know. They've got road pieces, which are really cool. This one I have, and I have not yet built, but it's basically like a ruined building, and you can see, again, you know, here's a guy down here in the corner, so it's pretty big, you know. And that's, I think, just kind of nice stuff to have. And then I've also picked up relatively recently stuff from Death Ray Designs, and Death Ray Designs, they do a bunch of cool cyberpunk stuff. They do a lot of cool stuff, but this is the stuff that I picked up from them. They're very, again, modular, almost like brutal kind of architecture, but then there's all kinds of stuff stuck to the outside. Like this is the Pod Hotel bundle. So you're getting, let's see if we can get it bigger. There we go. So yeah, this is like a capsule hotel like you have in Japan and stuff like that, but they're calling it a pod hotel. And everything is very modular. Like these things on the side, those little pods, you can just pop those off. They are designed to go onto the side of the building and kind of lock on. And then if you want to move them or whatever, you can do that. And put them on the other side. So everything here is built to be, it looks a little. It doesn't look bad. I don't think it looks like MDF as much, but it is designed to kind of cleverly hide a lot of that tab and slot. But then you can be like, okay, cool. Whoops. I don't want to have this entrance on the front over here. I've decided instead I'm going to put the sushi shack on the side. And again, they're all modular and designed to be, fit together. There we go. So, it's just kind of cool to see that sort of stuff and be able to do that. I don't know what kind of battle is going on here at this sushi shop. I don't know why sushi shop is hard for me to say, but it is. So, anyway, yeah, these are some of the companies that are making MDF stuff that I like the look of, and it doesn't look super MDF-y. But you are going to be dealing predominantly with straight lines. It's not something that you can do cool curves. You don't get a lot of, textured walls that you can just dry brush real easily. There is some texture. Obviously, we've got some of that grading in the background. You've got some kind of embossing that's going on on the roof here and everything like that. But it kind of comes down to a little bit of paint technique and things like that to weather these buildings and make them look a little bit interesting. And here you got a vent, and here you got a ladder. But you could also stick on some other stuff, 3D printed resin or whatever, to make it look even a little bit more interesting. And then graffiti and stuff like that. That always helps as well. So there's that. All right, let me do this and then do this and then go back to here. Nope, not that one. That one. There we go. That would work great for Zone Alpha. Absolutely, yeah. Does MDF work well with fantasy settings? Honestly, not great. To be perfectly frank with you, that's the one issue about MDF is it doesn't work great with fantasy settings because it's very hard to make it look like stuff's made out of bricks. You can make stuff look like it's made out of modern bricks, where all the bricks are exactly the same size and the mortar's all perfect and all that kind of stuff. You can do that. It's very difficult to make something look like it's made out of, weirdly kind of not the same size sort of bricks. Think of any castle, in any kind of Game of Thrones or whatever like that. In many situations, things are a little janky because they're not all exactly perfectly machined, and that's difficult to do with MDF. There are some things out there that you can do, and I've seen some people do some interesting stuff, but yeah, fantasy stuff is a little bit harder to do MDF with, I think, because it doesn't look like a building. Can you give a ruined look to MDF? Oh, sure. Besides the kind of weathering and stuff like that you can do to it with paint, you can also even put bullet holes in it. You can kind of chip away at it a little bit before you paint it. I think that's not a bad idea. Yeah, I'm generally more of a fan of just I'm going to do that stuff with paint techniques. A little bit of airbrushed. On the sides of buildings, when the rain comes off the top of the building and it hits the ground, it splashes up on the side of the building, and the bottom of the building gets that kind of dark fade that kind of fades out as it goes higher. It's almost like a gradient. Just do a little bit of that with airbrush, and you can make any building, modern type buildings or futuristic type buildings. Even some fantasy. You can make them look a lot more realistic just with a very simple thing like that. Blacksite Studios, also co-owned by an Aussie. I had no idea. Maybe the Aussies make just most of the MDF, because there's a lot of MDF companies over in Australia. It's interesting. Micro Art Studio adds thin sheets of scored polystyrene for curved walls on some of their kits. Who's the other company that does some stuff? Warsenal? I think they might do this. They do a lot of stuff for... Warsenal does a lot of stuff for Infinity. And Infinity has some curves to it, but I don't know that they do a ton of that stuff, the curved plastic stuff. I had a sous chef at the sushi shop. That is... yeah, there you go. I think MDF is an automatic include for people who don't have the time investment for picking out the nitty-gritty details. I think it's just a situation of MDF is great when you just don't quite know, or you just don't have the architecture mindset, which I don't particularly. I've built some terrain from scratch before, not a ton. And I don't mean I took a plastic junction box from the hardware store and glued a bunch of crap onto it and made it into a sci-fi little bunker. That's fine. But I'm talking about actually cutting out, foam core and building and there's a floor and then there's a window and all that kind of stuff. That to me is a little bit more kit bash, like what I'm talking about. You can take nearly anything. You can take an old pill bottle, you can take a glue bottle, and then paint it and glue stuff to it and things like that, and now it's a cooling tower. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But when you're like, now I'm going to do part of a building, if you don't really have a background or a mindset kind of in architecture, you have to spend a lot more time looking at buildings and figuring things out and measuring all that kind of stuff. And if you can just be like, or I can just buy this building of MDF and then put it together following the instructions, and it still looks pretty good, then I'm kind of a fan of that. Now, if you're like, but I want it to look like a ruined castle, well, then MDF is not necessarily the way to go for you. So there's that too, yeah. I got a few TT Combat City Streets pieces for Fallout / Zone Alpha, and after a paint job, they look pretty good. The rigidity of MDF is a great look for modern buildings. Yes, absolutely. I think that's really where it shines. MDF might make good Tudor house upper floors if you were willing to make the brick lower. Yeah, I could see that. I could definitely see that. And foreground does do some stuff. Like, I own like a ruined foreground Tudor building. It's a little bit of a Mordheim-y kind of look to it. You know what I mean? Where it's got that, like, a lot of Mordheim was like Tudor style buildings that then kind of got ruined when the comet hit the city. You know what I mean? And so that Mordheim stuff has got, like, there's like two sides, I think, to the building, and in the middle it's just all kind of gone. And so yeah, so that type of stuff, right? You could do MDF, but again, like castle walls and stuff like that, I think are a little bit harder to do. Hearst Arts molds would be the great way to go in that situation. That is true. I think we're all ruined by the prevalence of close-up photography online. No one plays with their face 6 inches from the terrain. Well, I mean, maybe you don't, but I don't know. I think that I still like stuff to look a little bit more realistic. Like the standard, I don't know. I'm of two minds, because I have a tendency to generally kind of paint my terrain to not be so crazy colorful. I like my terrain to be a little bit more neutral so that my miniatures stand out more. So that is true. But I still like there to be some kind of detail on my miniature, or on my stuff. I don't want to just be like, oh, here's a couple of flat pieces of foam core and now it's a building, kind of, So I do like it to spend a little bit more time and put in an extra detail, but it doesn't have to be crazy super high detail. I agree, MDF is great for a modern to future setting. I know some folks use MDF buildings for train layouts. Oh, interesting. Easy to build, and with little work on a train layout, they can look great. I know a lot of there's a lot of companies out there that make specific buildings just obviously for train boards, not terrain, but train, like choo-choo, choo-choo. Those little model trains is what a word I'm looking for. And they're usually made out of some sort of molded plastic or something like that, and can look actually hyper-realistic to some degree. I mean, not like you're going to fool anyone into thinking that it's actually like little tiny people living in there, but, more realistic than most wargaming terrain. I also found that MDF performs better for battle reports. Makes it easier to pick out the models and get a better idea of the layout and how the rules and strategy. Yeah, if terrain gets too detailed and too almost like a diorama, then yeah, again, you'll lose models in it. You know what I mean? Let's see here. Joined late since I was watching the England/Croatia game. Well, there you go. To be fair, one could sculpt every figure in their army from scratch, but most of us would rather buy easy to put together kits for those. Sure, yeah, that's absolutely true. New house shouldn't be riddled from stem to stem with shipworm tunnels, for one thing. Well, sure, true. I saw this as I am sculpting and digital kit bashing my own. Nice. I say this. I gotcha. Okay. Yeah, like I'm definitely considering, once I, because with all of my extra free time, I am definitely been considering lately, especially now that I have a 3D printer, though I still haven't set it up yet. Soon, hopefully. I want to start designing basically like air conditioning units and electrical junction boxes and just weird junk like that. Some of it looking more modern, some of it maybe even being a bit sci-fi, and then being able to print that stuff out and then use it in my own models and things like that. I want to use the, either Fusion 360, but I think honestly I could get away with Tinkercad on some of that stuff. Tinkercad is a 3D sculpting program. Well, it's technically, it runs in a browser, so you don't even need to download it. It's free. You just go to tinkercad.com, CAD, C-A-D, tinkercad.com, and you can make your own stuff in 3D in there and then save it out as an STL file and then print it, if you want to, or do other stuff with it as well. You can save in lots of different formats. But so yeah, I have kicked around the idea of starting to make some groups of like different things that you would then use as embellishments on your buildings. And you're starting to see more people do that as well. But just because someone else is doing it doesn't mean you don't want to give it a try as well. You may have a different take to it, or something like that. So yeah, I've been looking kind of at doing that as well. It's just kind of fun for adding to terrain stuff, because it used to be Greeblies where you would like look for stuff. You'd be like, you'd find like, oh, this is a cool piece of plastic I can use, like these things. Like when you buy like something that's got like a HDMI at the end and they put the little plastic plug on there, or sometimes they do it with USB as well. I frequently save these because I'm like, oh, I'm going to stick this to the outside of a terrain building at some point. Well, it doesn't really look like anything. It's just this goofy, but maybe if I glue 3 more things to it, then it'll look like something like a little, junction box. Great. Or if I just print one because I've already got one designed, it'll just save me a bunch of time in the long run. This is the hope. GW Terrain, for example, is often covered in fiddly details that I want to play. MDF Terrain is often more plain, which makes it easier for painting. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I do appreciate like a nice plastic piece of terrain with a lot of detail. I like some of the the GW buildings and stuff like that. Some of the fantasy stuff, some of the non-fantasy stuff. That being said, yeah, it is sometimes also nice to just have other options. Frequently cheap, like GW doesn't make anything that's really going to work with, say, Zona Alpha or games like that, or any kind of cyberpunk stuff or anything like that. So that's why you end up looking outside of that area. Are you a fan of Sarissa Precision MDF products? Their Antares Boromite structures are interesting. I've not heard of any of that. I apologize. No, I don't. Sarissa Precision. I've never heard of them. No. Crazy straws are great for piping bits. Oh yeah, I can see that. Sure. There's so much stuff on that, like sites like Thingiverse, where you can grab STL files and print all your Greeblies. Sure, but then they won't be mine. Like I want to make my own kind of stuff. That's generally, I just like creating stuff. So if you're looking for stuff out there, then certainly, yeah, definitely go check on places like Thingiverse and whatever and to find stuff. But if I want to make something that's specific to what I'm trying to do, plus I like to learn how to do new things. So making some cool STL files that I can then use to print, and that's like, I don't want to, I'm not saying I want to go full blown and start making like figures, like people, like miniatures and stuff like that, because I don't think I'm talented enough to go down that road. Or, I mean, I could, but it could take me an incredibly long time, and I got other stuff to do. But junction boxes, air conditioning units, stuff like that, alarm systems, little things that you put on the outside of buildings, I could definitely do a lot of that stuff, and it would be fun to learn. So that's one of the reasons why I'm looking at that stuff. But if you're interested in just printing out some stuff like that, yeah, there's probably a lot of different people out there making those things currently that you could just go, and then I like to think of the 3D printer as a machine that I can both just take things and then print them and get them, but also make things and then print them and get them, but not exclusively one or the other. I used to work with people that made models for architects before CAD renders became a thing. I wish I could talk to them and record all their techniques for making buildings. They have a lot of craft gold. Oh yeah, the people that like, you're a big fancy architect and you're working on a big project, and then you need to show like a model of what this is all going to look like. The people that used to crank that stuff out basically completely by hand, before laser cutters, before 3D printing, all that kind of stuff. That is an art, and it was expensive. Like when you see like in a movie, like, oh, we're gonna knock down this part of town and build this big, and here's a model of what we're gonna do. Like RoboCop or stuff like that. Those models to make, like for an architecture company, are incredibly expensive and very time consuming. Now less so, because you can just be like, you designed you designed the building in CAD. We can take parts of that and produce stuff, laser cut MDF, laser cut cardboard, 3D printed bits, blah blah blah, and it's a little bit easier and quicker, but it's still not, it's still a lot of work. I use Blender. It's good, but it has a bit of a learning curve. Yes, I've messed with it just a scotch, and I was like, whew, yeah. I also use 3D Builder, which helps me get stuff to the right scaling before printing, really precise scaling. Interesting. There's a company called Imperial Terrain, and their website is imperialterrain.com, and they have this new thing. Like, they've been a company for years. They started out as a company that was basically making terrain STLs, like stuff that you would print predominantly more with a filament printer and less with a resin printer. But they were making buildings that were basically kind of Star Wars-esque, because when Star Wars Legion came out, there was no terrain for it at all. Like, Asmodee, Fantasy Flight, whoever the hell makes it, they didn't have any terrain for it at all when it launched. So they were like, well, we'll make a bunch of Tatooine stuff and all these kind of things. And so initially, I don't know if they even sold STLs. I think initially, well, yes, they did. They mainly just sold STLs so you could print your own, but they would also print it for you if you didn't have a printer. I think they've stopped doing the we'll print it for you bit, and they just sell STLs, but they have a new system, which is really interesting, because what happens is you go in and then you pay, like, basically it's a builder you can kind of customize yourself. So you're like, I want my building to be square or rectangular or whatever, and then you can plop down different sides. Like, they have all of these different sides that you can, and a roof and all that kind of stuff, and you have all these different things to choose from, and then you can click into, let's say, this side and decide you want to move the door over to this side and then move this window over here and put the little lockbox thing over, and you can slide the parts around, and then you create the building you want. You can spin around, look at it, see all the things you want, and then go, that's the one I want, and then they will produce it as an STL file and then send it to you. And there's a cost, but then now you have your custom thing, but it's not like I have to completely design every part. It's Star Wars-y looking, let's say, but then they also have one that's a little bit more kind of gothic sci-fi looking, and they're going to be adding in new themes, and then you can build your own buildings. And it's really kind of cool. I really dig it. Let's see here. One of the best ways to address your more DIY buildings is by printing some posters and sealing them to the building using Mod Podge. Matt, of course. Well, sure. Yeah, I did that. Like, the first ever building that I built, like foam core, ruined corner sort of situation. I should put pictures of it on Instagram at some point. It's at the studio. But I did print little tiny color posters on maybe the laser printer at work, like color laser printer at work at the time, whatever. And then, I glued those on there and stuff like that. I think I even burned one with a lighter a little bit, so it was, little stuff, All roads lead to RoboCop. You were doing the God's work there, moderator Matt. I appreciate it. One can't deny the idea of a model getting lost to your opponent on the board is a strategic function of tabletop gaming. If you took advantage of functional camouflage, can you be blamed for that? I mean, I've had games before where I've forgotten where people are. It depends on the terrain build. Sometimes you sneak somebody, like, underneath, like you've got a ruined corner over here, and you sneak somebody underneath the floor, and they're just looking out the window, and then your opponent forgets about that model, and you're like, well, this guy's going to fire, and he's like, what guy? And you're like, oh, this guy hiding under there, and they're like, that happens. So yeah, I don't know. Death Ray Designs has a pack of greeblies available. It's various shapes in MDF, plastic piping, and some 3D printed bits that are made for gluing onto your own foam core buildings. Oh, nice. That's a good idea. Brutal Cities has something like that too, but not, it's just all MDF, but it's like venting to put on the side of the building, and, like, a little bit of conduits, but it's just all laser cut MDF. That's cool that they have that plastic and 3D printed stuff in there. That's very cool. Let's see here. Do you think I should include instructions for building terrain in my game, just as a suggestion? I mean, it's up to you. Some games will definitely, like, you don't see it as much anymore. But if you go back and look at older games, sometimes in miniatures, there's, like, entire sections about hobby. There's entire sections about how to, like, build stuff. If you look at, actually not that long ago, a pretty recent game, which is called Raven Feast. 98% sure it's called Raven Feast. It's a free PDF put out by the folks at Little Wars TV, and it is a game designed to help people get into kind of more historical gaming. So it's like Vikings versus Vikings type of thing. If I remember correctly, in there they have a little section that, like, talks about how, like, shows you, like, step by step how to make, like, a Viking longhouse kind of a thing out of relatively simple materials and such. So yeah, you do see that sometimes there. Blender's interface used to be so much worse. What it is now is a blessing. See, I guess I haven't used it in a while, so maybe it would be better right now. But for right now, I've been enjoying Tinkercad for the most part. I've forgotten about my own miniatures in a game, hidden in a ruin. That's less fun. Sure, I can understand that. Hero Forge, but for buildings. Kind of. Yeah, a little bit. That's kind of what they're doing. Because Hero Forge, if you're not familiar with Hero Forge, that's a site where you can basically create your own miniatures. They have, zillions of different types of things. Like, you start out with body size, and then you start out with, like, is it be robot people, or regular people, or dragon people, or turtle people? I mean, they got all kinds of different options in there for different types of games. And then you can say, okay, I want, like, this hat, and this cloak, and this gun, and this shoes, and then there's a lot of different pre-made poses, and then you can also start with one of those pre-made poses, and then even go in and customize it and say, I want to turn the wrist this way, and move the arm that way. And so you have limited things that you can do to change the pose. And then the idea is that you get done with that and then you go, cool, now print it for me and mail it to me, and then now I have it. And that was their business plan initially. But then a couple of years ago, they added the ability to be like, cool, now just email me the PDF, or not the PDF, the STL. And I think it costs $8 or $10, I think, if I remember correctly, and then you could print it yourself, and then so that's a cool thing too, because if you get it printed and shipped, like high quality plastic or high quality is it's hard to say, not the quality, the high detail plastic is, I want to say maybe $35 or $40 shipped, at least here in the United States. If it's shipped overseas, I don't know. But yeah, if you've already got a printer, then getting it 3D printed makes, I think, a lot of sense. So, or if you got a friend with a 3D printer, be like, hey, if I get this STL and give it to you, can you print it for me and give it to me? Boom. So yeah, that's what Imperial Terrain is basically doing right now too. And I think the folks over at My Mini Factory have some sort of thing they're doing like that too, but it's more for like fantasy buildings, Tudor style, castle-y, bricky, stony kind of stuff like that. Paper terrain printed on cardstock is a really cheap alternative that can look not too shabby. In certain situations, yeah, absolutely. I mean, cardstock, paper, that kind of stuff can be also curved a little bit easier. So if the building has more of a curve to it in certain spots, that's also kind of nice. As an off-topic, did you decide if you were making it to Valhalla this year? I have not made a decision, which very probably means maybe no at this point. It's in October, I think. Yeah. I know I've got late October I've got a couple of conventions I want to go to. Unfortunately, they're the same weekend, but I'm going to figure it out. They're not that far apart from each other. Like 120 miles. So that's doable. It's like a 2-hour drive probably. Anyway, but yeah, I haven't thought real hard about Valhalla yet. I just don't know if I'm ready to get back on a plane yet, and I'm not about to drive to Utah. That sounds terrible. I don't like to drive like long distances. Like Adepticon for me is 3 hours. That's fine. Gen Con for me is about 6.5. That's stretching it, but that's just a personal thing. Let's see here. The historical period that attracts me most is the late 19th century colonial wars. Ospreys, the men who would be king, is the one I want to get. Nice. I'm going to be running to the FLGS today to grab 2 boxes of heavy intercessors and a box of terminators to convert to my dark angels. Nice. Adam's death will not be glorious enough for Valhalla. I have seen it in a vision, kind of mediocre to be honest. Is there something that's not quite Valhalla? Is Valheim? Is that like, yeah. I guess that's maybe, I don't know, it's hard to say. I like to try historical naval game Black Seas. The ship models look fantastic, if a little small. I like painting small scale stuff. What's the one that's from Firelock Games? Is that Black Powder? I don't know. There's definitely one that has like resin ships that are like, some of them are like a foot and a half long, and they're kind of expensive, but they're cool looking. I don't know that, I don't know about playing, I don't know. I don't know if that's my interest area for gaming, but I look at the ships and I go, oh, those are cool. Favorite genre for mini games, that ties in there right there. It seems I do like to aim towards more sci-fi stuff, or fantasy. I I guess I'm not a historical miniatures fan, and I'm not against it. I don't think it's bad. It's just not for me. So even like modern day stuff that is fantastical to some degree, like Zona Alpha. Zona Alpha is a game in which aliens came, landed on Earth in a bunch of different places around the globe, hung out, did alien crap for a little bit, and then left. And they left behind a bunch of junk. If you've ever read the book Roadside Picnic, Zona Alpha is kind of inspired heavily, and they say that right in the book. It's inspired heavily by Roadside Picnic. And the idea is that these areas that were left behind with all this alien stuff, people are like, oh, this stuff is cool, and they go in there and they find some neat gadget that does whatever, and then they can sell it and make a bunch of money, and that's cool. And then other people go into that same area and they step in the wrong spot, and then they get turned inside out or something. And so that's bad. So the countries where these aliens landed, they build these walls around these areas, and they're now exclusion zones. And so the concept of the game is that these stalkers, these people who break in through the exclusion zones and go in treasure hunting and trying not to get turned inside out, and then sometimes there's zombies and like feral dogs and all kinds of stuff and whatever. And so it's all modern-ish. It's not sci-fi, but it's also completely fantastical. It's not, like a normal military style game. So that's the thing that I'm more interested in personally. I kind of don't like, and again, this is not, if you like this, I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't like playing games that actually happened. You know what I mean? I don't like making light of military history, and that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously, like, it's unlikely that, and I've said this before, like, your grandpa might have been in World War II. Your grandpa probably never fought the Visigoths, in 1095 or whatever. So, ancients, but to me, ancients, that just, for some reason, that doesn't interest me either. So yeah, I'm generally more about like fantasy with, dragons and wizards and crap like that, or sci-fi, or stuff that's modern, but alternate history, crazy weird alien stuff, that kind of jazz. Those are my personal preferences. Blood and Plunder, that's the one with the pirates, I forgot. What are your thoughts on campaign/legacy elements? My game has these baked in. It's all very malleable. I like campaign a lot. It's interesting. It's an interesting concept to work legacy into miniature games. For those of you who don't know, legacy games they're very popular in board games. One of the first ones out there was a game called Risk Legacy. You've probably heard of Risk. It's been around forever. It's made by, I don't know, Hasbro now, probably, Milton Bradley, Parker Brothers, one of those big companies. And, you play Risk, and then you get into a fight with your brother, and then you stop, or whatever, and it's fine. Well, Risk Legacy, the idea behind that game was like, you'd be going through and playing a game, and if a certain thing happened in a game, you had this book, and you'd be like, oh, that thing happened. And then you would go in and find this, like, little tiny envelope that has a card in it. You would tear that thing because it was sealed. You'd tear it open and pull the card out. Or there was a sticker that you now had to stick in this country, and now things changed. And so every time you play the game, the board changes. And really, in the grand scheme of things, you can really only play the game maybe, I think it was 15 to 20 times before all of the surprises are basically surprised. But yeah, you started to see board game companies starting to do that because it changes the play, and it's not just the same game over and over again. But you do have usually a certain amount of times you can play it, at which point it's done. I like the concept of some sort of legacy sort of aspect maybe in miniature games, but honestly I think that campaign can do the job just as well, because then your campaign can be different than the previous campaign or the next campaign and that kind of stuff. So yeah. What is the name of the introduction game you tend to recommend? Song of Blades and Heroes by Ganesha Games. It's the Hindu elephant god, Ganesha or Ganesha. I forget exactly how it's pronounced. But yeah, Song of Blades and Heroes is the way to go. Scratch building terrain is fun, but feels like a hobby in itself. Oh, it certainly can be, absolutely. MDF is a nice middle ground for me. Certainly, absolutely. Been looking for a new tabletop system with the buffet-like system like Kill Team, but without the license pricing of GW. Any recommendations? I'd play it with self-created MDF terrain to be... it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for stuff to be more, like I said, like Zona Alpha might be a good choice. This is by Osprey Games, and it is You can use basically kind of modern military miniatures, and even stuff that's not particularly modern, like like the 80s. Like the most recent warband or group that I built for these guys are all basically kind of using 80s era technology and whatever, which is fine. But again, the Zona Alpha is the game I was explaining before with the exclusion zones and the aliens landed and all that kind of stuff. But you can get this from Osprey. It's one of those little 64-page blue book, games, and it's does it say what the price is? $20. So this is an option if you're into, I don't know, like demons and stuff like that. You could do a game like this, which is called Rain and Hell. It's made by these two nerds down here on the bottom. If you're into that, you can then do all kinds of cool, fun stuff with your demons and things like that. I think laser cut MDF terrain for this game would be a little weird. There are some ruined buildings in the ideas behind Rain and Hell. Rain and Hell is like when Hell was all set up and running good before everything went to crap. There were bureaucratic ziggurats is a term that was used in the book. And different types of structures like that, but now they're predominantly in ruined. And sometimes ruins in MDF are hard to do. Like, it just doesn't quite look right. But, otherwise, if you're looking for something for about $5, I like Space Weirdos a lot, too, as well. If you're, again, looking for something that's miniatures agnostic, it's not, made by the big companies, something kind of indie. It's only a little 16-page booklet. I mean, technically, you're buying the PDF. You'd have to print the booklet out yourself, like I did if you were into that. Or you could just, do it however you want. But, yeah. Those are options as well. Wow, your grandpa is 2,000 years old. Wow. I haven't played a campaign since Gamma World and TSR, post-apocalyptic RPG, kind of in the same mold as D&D. Yeah, I'm familiar with Gamma World. That's campaigns are cool. I really like campaign playing in miniature games. I mean, it's fine to play one-off and just hang out and have a good time, play with your friend. But when you're playing a skirmish game, which has a tendency to run shorter anyway, it's not like usually you play a 2-hour skirmish game, but sometimes maybe you do. I just like the concept of, that's one of the big things we put into Rain and Hell was we wanted it to be a game where like you played multiple games in a row, not necessarily all on the same day, obviously, but you could if you wanted to. I don't know what your schedule's like, but your cabal grows both in numbers of demons up to 10, but then also like this demon, which was a minion demon that is a lesser demon, at some point might become a greater demon or even a superior demon if you play your cards right and that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's cool. Let's see here. Just opened Wargame Vault, and your game is #1 bestseller. Congrats! Thank you. Yes, it's been up there since we launched it. We launched it on the 28th of May, and it's been like we launched it 28th of May. Like, well, technically we launched on the 27th of May, just before midnight my time. So anyway, but when I woke up on Friday morning, 28th, I was like, geez, I wonder how we're doing. And then we were #1, and we've been there since, which has been great. It's been selling really well, which is cool. But thank you. I think the character development beyond simply getting some new gear is hugely appealing in a skirmish game. Mordheim did it really well. Kill Team and Warcry do it poorly. I think Kill Team does it the worst. Kill Team's campaign, and that's if they're going to make a new version of Kill Team this year, which I do think they probably will. I mean, maybe just to spite me, not really, but maybe they will actually push it to next year, but I kind of feel like they're still going to try to launch it this year, although they're not going to launch it this summer because Age of Sigmar is coming in like July, I guess, and so maybe they'll push it to fall, and everything's all squirrely with COVID and all that jazz. Anyway, my point is, I hope that they make a better campaign system for Kill Team. I don't think they need to update Kill Team, frankly, but they do need to update the campaign system. So that would be nice if they're going to make a second edition, fix the campaign system, make it less boring, more interesting, more in-depth, something. I don't know. Warcry, the campaign system's fine. It's okay. But Mordheim is kind of the gold standard, certainly, for GW campaign-type games like that. I agree. One Page Rules is a great skirmish system, sci-fi and fantasy. Yeah, One Page Rules has been killing it. They've got like army style games in sci-fi and fantasy. They've got skirmish style games in sci-fi and fantasy. They got spaceship combat games now. FTL is another one. Started playing 5 Parsecs from Home. It's a fantastic solo/co-op war game. Never touching a GW game again. Well, I mean, that's up to you. I don't know. But 5 parsecs from home is very cool. It's on my iPad, which is not within arm's reach, but I do have it on my iPad. It's very cool. MDF is fine. Hell is entirely built in brutalist architecture. I mean, I guess that makes sense a little bit. Any plans for a Game 4 return app or website? We are still hoping to be able to bring it back soon. We're not exactly sure when. Things are getting better as far as, obviously, game stores, at least in the United States, opening up and things like that. I know that Wizards of the Coast, as of, I think, the 28th of May, has reinstituted Friday Night Magic. Because basically, when the pandemic hit, Wizards was just like, stores, you don't get to do Friday Night Magic anymore. If you do Friday Night Magic, we're not taking the stats. We're shutting down the website or whatever for the DCI. I don't really play Magic, but I know that when you go play Magic on Friday nights at most places, then you get a score, and then you have a number, and it goes into a website someplace, and then they track your stuff. I'm not exactly sure. Anyway, that was all like, no, we're shutting that down because you shouldn't be running events in your store. That was what Wizards of the Coast was saying. As of, like I said, I think it was the 28th. It was Friday the 28th of May. They were like, okay, you can turn it back on now. So, that's a thing. So, yeah, we are definitely planning on bringing it back. The main issues right now is that things are better in America, or getting better in America, but they're not getting better everywhere, Like Canada's kind of slow in the rollout as far as that kind of stuff is concerned over the vaccine. The UK, things are getting better, things are moving along, but we're not like in America, a lot of people are just like, oh, it's over. We're like, not really, but if you're vaccinated, you're in better shape, and you can probably go to a restaurant and not worry about wearing a mask as much and stuff like that. CDC has been telling us that kind of stuff. That all being said, the second problem is that also we are, and this is a good problem to have, we're pretty swamped with like regular paying work. Game 4 is not the business. Like the company that I work for, Milk Can, we like do business to business websites and this and that and the other thing for all kinds of different companies. And the Game 4 thing was always a side project that we did because we're tabletop gamers and we think that there was a need for it. And it was really starting to kind of take off just about, we went to a great convention, trade show in March of 2020, and we talked to a lot of different publishers and all kinds of stuff, and we were like, this is really starting, and then, because of the pandemic. So we do want to bring it back, but we also have to understand that we are, we only have so much time to do that stuff. So we're hoping summer or fall, probably closer to fall, I got to be honest. So there's that. But yes, there is definitely plans to bring it back. So I built my terrain to match Mantic's Dead Zone for the most part. While Dead Zone is played on a grid, it also helps me eyeball measure for games that use measure tapes. Sure, I can understand that. Any advice for painting patterns on curved surfaces? No. I don't really do freehand, barely ever, so I'm not the guy. I'm sure, or pretty sure at least, that Sam Lenz, if you check him out, Lenz, L-E-N-Z, if you check him out on YouTube, I'm pretty sure he's got some videos about freehand stuff and things like that. We're hoping to get back together again soon. I think he's fully vaccinated now, so we're hoping to get back together soon and do some, at least get together and play some Warcry, at the very least, you know what I mean? But we want to start doing some video stuff together as well, so yeah. Just got my Rain and Hell softcover in the mail. Very excited to try it. My first mini agnostic, mostly play board games, but this sounded so fun. Well, good to hear. I'm glad to hear it. Absolutely. Do you play 40K or Horus Heresy? I never played Horus Heresy. I have played 40K in the past. I have not really played 40K for quite some time. I'm just not a big fan of big army games anymore. I just don't want to have a 1,500 to 2,000 point army of anything. I want to have little skirmish groups, war bands of 10, maybe 15 max. I've got... For Warcry, I've got a group of Plague Monks, the Skaven little dudes. I've got a group of 13 of them. That's probably my biggest army. Otherwise, I've got a group of Stormcast Eternals, and it's like 5 dudes. You can definitely... I love the buffet aspect of, I'm going to do some Stormcast, then I'm going to do some Skaven, then I'm going to do some Adeptus Mechanicus for, Kill Team, and then I'm going to do some... Tyranids, and then I'm going to go back and do some skeletons for, Warcry. I like doing little groups of that as opposed to saying I got to crank through this 2,000 point army. It's just, and I don't like playing those games either, specifically. Like they just take too long. I don't like moving squads. I like moving each person individually, and I don't know. It's just a personal preference. Rain in Hell looks really cool. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. Vince Venturella from YouTube here, Warhammer Weekly. We worked on it. We started building it back in October of 2020 because I had this idea for quite some time, and I'd reached out to Vince a couple of times and said, I'm going to try to get some things together. We should get, and he's like, yeah. And then I did eventually get bored enough during the pandemic that I was like, I finally put together like a document. And I was like, what do you think? And then we started meeting like every week online because he lives in Ohio and I'm in Wisconsin. And and we just kind of built that game. And I did I did a lot of the early kind of concepting and stuff like that. I did a good portion of like the creative writing portions. I did all the layout. And I did the art direction and got the cover artist and basically worked with the artist's empire is the people. He's the guy, Scott, his name is, who did like we took a lot of the images that are in that game are like this image here on the back. Like these are 3D printed models that I had my friend Matt at Game4 from the Game4 podcast. He printed them in resin. I painted them, photographed them against a white background, and then Artist Empire went through and digitally added in all of the extra craziness and the fire and the smoke and the scariness and all that jazz. And this stuff looked just awesome. Like, here it is in black and not the same one, but this is also again a photo, which has just got digital painting over the top of it. But those are models that I painted. I know that Vince did a really super cool one that's from Arch Villain. I think it's further in the back of the book and I missed it. Yep, here. Back there, now some focus. So yeah, that's a huge arch villain, like winged beast with a giant flaming sword, and it just, they look great. So, and Vince did the mechanics, and like he came up with the whole concept of the D12 activation and all this different stuff and everything, and so we worked together quite well. He's way more mathy and that kind of stuff, and I'm the more artsy fartsy side, and so it worked out quite well. Hi from the Philippines, glad to be here live. Wishing everyone some productive hobby time tonight. Absolutely. My vision of hell and Rain in Hell, which I got in love, is hell is frozen over and the main demon at the time is griping about how long it takes to light the pilot light, and then all hell breaks loose. Nice. Freehand is a game of fixing it over and over. Yeah, I could definitely... Freehand takes a ton of patience, practice, and you definitely have to understand that you're going to end up doing it probably multiple times. Let's see here. 3D printing demon number 22 and 23 for Rain in Hell. Need to start painting them. Nice. I love Horus Heresy. When you say 1,500 to 2,000 points, that's just a starting point in 30K. Yeah, again, another reason why I don't see myself. Like, I like looking at it. I go to... when I go to Adepticon, I've got a bunch of friends that play Horus Heresy stuff, and so I will... Almost any... I can't think of an Adepticon in recent history where at least one night during the, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there's at least one night, no, not Sunday night, obviously, because you leave in the afternoon on Sunday, but usually Friday or Saturday night, there is an evening where a big portion of it is just spent hanging around in the 30K room, in the Horus Heresy room, talking to friends of ours, drinking bourbon, and just talking silly and having a good time. And I love, and I take a lot of pictures of that stuff because they leave a lot of stuff set up and everything, and it's great looking stuff. But the game style, just big army games, are just kind of not my jam these days. My son, who's 11, just started playing Flames of War. The community has been super welcoming to him. Seems the old-timers like to see fresh faces join the hobby. See, that's really good. That's a very good thing to have, honestly, because there are some groups that are just not nearly as welcoming, but it's very cool. I think that definitely... a lot of the folks who are playing Flames of War have a tendency to skew older fathers, very possibly grandfathers, and so having a young kid interested in a game that, frankly, a lot of young kids aren't necessarily interested in, I think that's refreshing to them, and I see them wanting to foster that. That's really good that that's happening. Do you have a Facebook group for Rain in Hell? I don't, but... hey, Confucian Crow. But somebody does. I think there might be two. I'm a member of one of them. But I thought there were two, but I couldn't find the second one at first, and I don't know. So yeah, but there's definitely at least one, if not two, Facebook groups out there for Rain and Hell. They got started real early, like possibly on day one. All of a sudden, someone, and there's also a subreddit too, which is just r/Rain and Hell, that someone else started as well, which is great. I think Soda Addict actually, who's one of the irregulars, I think started that one, but I could be wrong. Have you tried Patrick Todorov's? I was just going to reach for the book down here, Zona Alpha, the expansion, Contraband. He self-published it. I think apparently puts more of a focus on solo co-op play. So it's interesting because there's a solo co-op play PDF add-on on the Osprey site that was designed for Zona Alpha. And I downloaded it, but I haven't tried it yet. But yeah, then he came out with this game Contraband, which is basically, it's not a game, it's an add-on, again, expansion, solo, like you said. I have not gotten it yet. I was going to buy it on Wargame Download, but then Patrick reached out and was like, hey, can I send you this? And so I gave him my address. I don't know if he's going to send it or not, so I'll see eventually. But yeah, I'm definitely interested in it, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, it's called Contraband with a K, and it's an add-on for, Zona Alpha. Goodness gracious. And you can get it right now. Like, if you want to buy the PDF, you can get it right now on Wargame Download. I think he has a print version you can buy too, but not through Wargame Vault, I mean. The print version, for some reason, is through Amazon. I'm not quite sure why. But yeah. Literally just finishing my last demon. Finally a good use for the Gellerpox infected. See, that's... Yes, I know what you mean. I could see that. Ever thought about doing a game for a game jam? I don't know. Like, there's a part of me that would sort of love to do a fun little, like, 16-page kind of zine-style type of game design. I don't know if Vince and I are... I don't know. I mean, like, right now, like I said, we're already starting to kind of pre-plan a little bit as we're still working on finishing up, like... blog posts. I mean, not finishing. We're going to keep adding stuff all the time to Rain and Hell as far as blog posts. Like, we're planning on making... We've got an FAQ/errata coming out, I think, this upcoming week. We've got, like I said, the expansion that's going to be a free download, which is going to give you the ability to play solo and co-op with 4 to 6 campaign scenarios, because they're special scenarios so that you can play that way. And then we'll keep, but we're not going to... And here's the thing. You'll get to a point where all of a sudden you're like, okay, the game is the game. All the information's out there. We're working on the next game, but that doesn't mean the first game is dead. Again, Games Workshop, the way that they kind of do things is that they've trained people to think almost a little bit. We're like, if we're not making more stuff for this game, the game is dead. The game is still just as viable on day one as it is on day 1,000, because it still just plays. And so I don't want to say we're trying to like buck that concept, but we will get to a point where we're like, this is the game. We'll answer questions, tweet at us and that kind of stuff, everything like that. But we've produced everything we're going to produce for this game currently. If we come up with something else, we might drop something in there, but that's kind of the way that works. So, and again, we haven't hit that point yet, certainly, but we're going to get to that point at some place, and then the new game will come out, and then boom. And it's not so much like we're expecting people, we're you guys crank out a new game every year. I'm like, well, this one is very different from the next one, so if people were like, I don't like demons, okay, cool, well, maybe you like this next thing, or, I don't like this thing, well, maybe you like the demon thing, so that's kind of the thought process, I guess. So my point is that sitting down to build another kind of mini game in between, I'm not saying no, but I don't know. Again, we both already have we both have day jobs and YouTube channels, so there's that. I wonder if my FLGS has copies of Rain and Hell. Probably not. Now, that being said, we are also working on a system to make it so that, because we've had some game stores reach out to us and say, I would like to stock Rain and Hell. So Rain and Hell, the book, is print on demand. So it's not like I have a garage full of these. When you order one, then they print it and they send it to you. So this is digitally printed. It doesn't look digitally printed. I think it's really good looking. And I'm a person who's like been a graphics nerd for a long time. When first digital printing books came out, print-on-demand books came out, they looked like jank. They were not good. But these, like, honestly, if you just would have chucked this at me and stuff, it would have taken me some time to figure out that this was not normal printed, that this was digitally printed. Anyway, my point is that so we can't just ship out a bunch of them to a store So what we're going to do is make a special link for every store that's interested, like an offer code, to give them their kind of store discount, and then they can order it and get it, and then they can stock it in their store. But we're going to be launching that in the next week or two, probably. We've kind of got most of the math figured out. There's not a system that's built into the company that we work with, which is Board Game Vault. So we kind of have to basically make a coupon, and then, so a store reaches out to us and says, I want to stock it. We make a special coupon just for them, tell them don't share it with people, and then they can order however many copies they want, and then they stock them in the store and stuff like that. So that is also coming. Let's see. Currently transferring all 100 of my Citadel paint pots into dropper bottles. Satisfying, but messy and time-consuming. Yeah, I've found there's a company that did a Kickstarter a couple of years ago, which I didn't do anything with, but then I recently found them someplace, like at a game store, I forget where. But they're little dropper toppers that go on top of normal Citadel bottles, which basically turn the normal Citadel pots into dropper bottles. I bought like 4 of them, and I haven't tried them out yet, but I've been considering it. We'll see. I don't know. I'm a little dubious, but they might work. For the most part, I don't want... Like, here's the thing. I generally barely ever use any opaque colors from GW anymore. I don't use any of their metallics. I use a couple of their skin tones because they're just like the color, but I got to thin them a lot and everything like that. It's a kind of a pain. I prefer other companies' opaques, predominantly Pro Acryl from Monument Hobbies. Those are kind of my jam. But washes and contrast, I use those all the time from Games Workshop, and I love them. I don't want those in a dropper bottle, though. I want to dip my brush into the contrast or dip my brush into the wash and then go to town. So those I wouldn't transfer if it was me. You know what I mean? I ran across someplace on some line, someone was like, I'm going to take all of my Vallejos and put them into, GW paint pots just to be different. I'm like, okay, I guess that's fine, Shadow War Armageddon lives, still better than Kill Team in many ways. Shadow War Armageddon, I liked it a lot because I'm like, oh, cool, this is like old Mordheim. And then they produced Mordheim like less than a year later, and I was like, well, why did you... I mean, so, yeah, Shadow War Armageddon, still technically a viable game if you own it. If you don't own it, it's hard to find. But if you own it, you can still play it. It's like they didn't shut off the servers, you know what I mean? Like, it still works. And it does have cool pinning mechanics, which I like a lot. But honestly, like, that game isn't dead. It's just... Basically, it's giving you the ability to play Necromunda with 40k models. Because it is nearly the same system. A little bit. I'm still confused as to why they released Shadow Armageddon and then about 6 months later released Necromunda. It just is weird. It doesn't, but it's what they did. Now, I like Necromunda, don't get me wrong, and so then I have a tendency to play Necromunda more, but if you want to use 40k folks, then Shadow Armageddon is the way to go. Because then you're basically playing the same, almost nearly the same Necromunda type rules, with pinning and this and that, and the ammo jam roll and all that kind of stuff. But yet you are playing with scouts and Imperial Guard and whatever, all those different types of regular 40k models. I think wanting expansions is just normal, not a GW ploy. Well, not a ploy, but it is. We have been kind of it's been ingrained into us. Video games have always done it with Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Super Mario sequels. Well, sequels are different than expansions to some degree. Very frequently, a sequel, at least in my mind, is a standalone game. But you know what I mean? Whereas an expansion is like an add-on. So an expansion is like DLC, if we're going to go down the video game route. To somewhat, you know what I mean? 20 years ago, the print industry used to think POD machines would be in every retail. I think that they're probably still too expensive to do that. And I remember hearing about that, where they're like, oh yeah, well, you'll just go into your local game shop and say, oh, I want this book, and then a machine will go brrr, and then out will come a book eventually. I think it's still not, those machines are incredibly expensive and large, but it's still just kind of nice to have that ability. Those are amazing. I put them on my contrast paints. Nothing is dried out. Huh. Wonder why. See, I like to just dip into the contrast paint, so I don't know why you put a drop top thing on top of it. I'm not saying, you know, you do you, certainly. But I could definitely see using it on the opaques that I still like Kislev Flesh I still like. The color's good. I do have a tendency to use it more as a glaze. There's a couple of the flesh tones that I use, but otherwise, well, there's a Plague Bearer Flesh. I don't know, it's like kind of like weird kind of green, or is it Death Guard? It's a relatively newish color. I want to say it came out around the same time the 8th came out, and it's cool. I like that color. There's a couple other ones I like, but I know right now as I'm talking, they're drying out down in those things in the basement. So there's that. I've designed my own dropper top and printed them in TPU. TPU. I'm not sure. I know it's a type of filament, I think, or resin, but I don't know what it means. To be rubbery, works well on a regular paint, but did not on the contrast ones. Yeah, again, like I said, I don't know. I mean, if you'd like to put the contrast stuff onto your wet palette or whatever, that's fine. But I've just been like, I'll dip in there, it's fine. Dropper bottles, one more convenient if you use an airbrush, but not necessarily if you paint the way I do. Like, I like dropper bottles because it allows me to put a drop of paint on my wet palette without having to like use a little tiny spatula, or because you really don't generally want to take your brush and dip it into the pot to transfer it over, because now you've got way more paint in your brush than you really need, and you end up having to clean a lot of it out, and then, you know what I mean? So some people, like I know Sam, like has a tendency to usually use the back of the brush and kind of scoops them out and put it on there. But it feels like you got a lot left on the back of your brush that you have to wipe off, and it's a thing, and I don't know. So I like dropper bottles because I use a wet palette for regular opaque paints. I think that's a big benefit. Let's see here. Dropper bottles, well, I just read that one. No one knows why they released Shadow War and sold them all in like 5 minutes flat. That was not expected. It was very odd. I remember it happened like they announced it during like the New York Toy Show or some big trade show that I wasn't at. And I was just like, wait, what are they doing? And I started reading it. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then when I got it, I was like, oh, this is basically old school Necromunda, because the rule set is very kind of second edition 40K. And I'm like, well, that's cool. They made, you know, they're like, well, we don't want to make Necromunda. We want to make something where you still use the 40K models, but it's like Necromunda, or it's very Necromunda-ish. And I was like, this is great. And started playing with some friends. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, guess what? We're releasing Necromunda. And I was like, wait, what? Who? What? So, yeah, it was interesting. Thank you for creating an every other Sunday YouTube playlist. Makes it really easy to listen to previous episodes, but it's missing your recent Rain in Hell episode. Yeah, those playlists are a pain. I got to figure out a way to make it. So when you post a regular video, I'll have to go back and check. When you post a regular video, you can say automatically add it to this playlist. But live stream videos, I don't think you can. Like, there's a lot of settings in the live stream videos that aren't in the regular videos. So, and I think that's one of them, but I should double check. I don't know. The live streams, I really hope, I don't know. There's a part of me that really hopes that YouTube eventually gets their live stream figured out. I like Twitch. I think it's cool. It would be a little better if I just did all my streaming on YouTube. Well, I mean, not now. I would like the concept of just doing everything on YouTube as far as video content. That would be great. But YouTube's live streaming is still not to the level of Twitch's to some degree, but everything else they do is way better than Twitch. So, you know, if YouTube ever gets serious and is like, you know what, we're just going to go and squish Twitch, they could do it, I think, pretty quickly. But I don't feel like they're interested in going down that road particularly right now, so I don't know. TPU is a flexible filament. It feels like rubber, works well for the dropper top so you can squeeze it to get the paint out. Nice. I use these old Tamiya, that's not how it's pronounced at all, I'm making that up. Paint stirrers to transfer the paint either to a container like an old blister pack, or to add water, or to palette paper. Yeah, like I said, I you know, you have to do that with pots, obviously. So for the few like colors that I have, unless I start using these dropper bottles on them, I don't know. But for most of the colors that I have that are still in a little pot that are opaque colors, then I end up having to transfer the color over or something like that, or be very sparing with it and just get a little bit on the brush, put it over onto the, and then that takes like 5 or 6 trips depending on what you're painting, which is fun. Yeah, but I should find like a tiny spatula maybe or something like that. I don't Is YouTube financially superior? So YouTube's got the they don't call it subscriptions. I mean, like subscriptions equal follows in Twitch. So when you follow somebody on Twitch, it's like you subscribe to them on YouTube. There's no money changing hands or anything like that. It's just like, hey, remind me when they post or remind me when they go live or whatever. On Twitch, if you subscribe to somebody, either with Twitch Prime or doing, like a normal tier 1 or even something like tier 2 or tier 3, subscriptions, then that's like a payment thing, and Twitch takes 50%. So, and that's not a secret or anything like that. I mean, people, they take 50%. So if you're doing a tier 1 subscribe to somebody, it's like the person gets like basically $250, and then Twitch gets the other half. That number is lower, I believe, with YouTube. YouTube takes less. And then Facebook, this is interesting, just like this last week, Facebook announced, because they're trying to get Facebook Gaming, which is their live streaming kind of Twitch sort of thing, they're really trying to get it rolling. They announced this week, like Zuckerberg himself was like, we're going to make it so that people can basically pay to subscribe to your streams on Facebook Gaming. And you, the creator, will get 100% of it up until 2023. Now, I don't know if he means the end of 2023, the beginning of 2023, but at the very least, all through the rest of this year and all through 2022, the creators on Facebook will get 100% of all incoming money through subscriptions. I don't know if they do bits and stuff like that, like they do with Twitch or whatever. And that's a pretty big deal. And then he followed it up by saying, and when we do start taking a cut, it will be less than 30%. So again, that is basically a big kind of middle finger over towards the Twitch crowd, not the people at Twitch, but the people who run Twitch. Because so I don't know. We'll see. I don't know if that will have a big effect or not. I try to stay away from Facebook about as much as I can. So I don't know that that's necessarily a draw. I don't know if, I know there are some big streamers who basically got paid to move to Facebook, a couple here and there. I don't know how they're doing, but we'll see. They kind of got the big, they got the bag by, I know there's a guy called, I've never watched any of his content, but I've heard about him. His name is Disguised Toast, I believe. And he basically is exclusive through Facebook Gaming. And I'm pretty sure that they threw a big pile of money at him. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting stuff. There's also a trick to pour paint directly from the bottle into your color cup. Use an old paintbrush handle against the edge of the bottle. The paint will float on the handle neatly. Interesting. YouTube is backed by Google. Amazon owns Twitch. Also true. I bought like 10 paints and got one for free. GW does some cool things sometimes. Well, that's weird. I didn't know they did that. I haven't figured out Facebook Gaming yet, but that's primarily where I stream. Yeah, I don't think I've ever watched any, well, I'm going to say I haven't watched any live streams on Facebook before. That's not true. But like every once in a while somebody goes live on Facebook and they're just like at a birthday party or an event or whatever. I've gone live on Facebook when my wife's band is playing at the farmer's market, and I'll sit there for a little while and people can watch and then, or watch it later if they want to, and that's fine. But generally, yeah, I've never gone there on purpose, I guess, to do that. You know what I mean? I can't start into painting just now. After I get the shopping done and dinner plan, I'll get to finish a bunch of models I've been working on since February. Nice. I wonder at what point will Facebook, Google, and Amazon start hiring Shadowrunners to mess with each other? Who says that they haven't already? Maybe. I have no idea. Let's see here. Matthew Sears owns the complete set of Shadowrun 2nd Edition. Nice. Basically, I collect whatever Dave references. There you go. That's a good idea. There's a fantastic 2nd Edition 40K group on Facebook. They've got lots of fan-created files, codexes, datafaxes to help old-timers like us play with play the game with new models. See, that's one of the things that I really love about tabletop games is that if you decide, I like this edition, and I don't care that you guys made a new edition, we're just going to keep playing here, you can keep doing that with your friends. When I talked about that recently on a Friday video, there was a lot of people in the comments who were just like, yeah, me and my 6 friends, we just play this game that's 20 years old, and we don't ever, like, oh yeah, we get together and play 3rd edition fantasy because that's what we like. Okay, cool. Well, technically we're going to be going into 3rd edition Age of Sigmar soon. So, you know, there's been a lot of things that have changed since then, but if you want to play it that way, that's fine. The whole concept of the Heartbreaker, as I mentioned earlier, so this is referred to, this Space Weirdos is referred to as a Skirmish Heartbreaker. Let me read the text real quick here. Space Weirdos is my Skirmish Heartbreaker. In RPG terms, a Heartbreaker is a fixed, and it's in quotes, version of D&D published by an amateur. In my online circles, a lot of old school D&D people are discovering or rediscovering miniatures wargaming and starting to write rules when they find the big games too expensive and convoluted. So a Heartbreaker is when you're like, I just really love this game, but there's like this and this and this that need to be fixed, and then you just basically go in and fix it and then republish it. Now, obviously, you can't call it that, thing, but the thing that's interesting about games rules is that you can't copyright a rules mechanic much. There's certain things you can do, from what I understand. If you have a chart that goes like, it follows specific numbers that are non-algorithmic, that if someone else is like, cool, I'll just grab that chart and put it in my game, that technically, from what I understand, you could count as like some sort of copyright and you could sue for it or whatever like that. But if you're just like, okay, well, we have this level progression where it goes up and it just follows this algorithmic curve, you can't copyright an algorithmic curve, I guess. So, and this is all stuff that, frankly, Vince has told me. It's interesting. So to sit down and make a game that's kind of like D&D, you just tweaked it a bunch and changed all the names. There's no reason not to do that if you want to do that. And if you're probably self-publishing it, you're probably not a big company. So, Wizards of the Coast or TSR back in the day doesn't even care. So taking some different things from different rules that you like and squishing it all together into one game and producing it out there as a very indie kind of like PDF or whatever, that's a cool thing. Also, just deciding, you know what, we're just not going to buy a new edition because we're just not interested. We really love this edition of the game, and there's a new version. We don't like it, so we just keep playing the old thing. That's cool, too. If you're into competitive play and you go to the shops and play, evidently, with people all the time or whatever, cool. Then you're going to have to probably keep up with the newest stuff, because if you go into the shops and they're like, hey, you want to play 40K? And then you pull out your 2nd edition book, they're going to be like, I don't even know what that is. And so, there's that. I made an RPG Heartbreaker once. It was universally canned. Oh, well, that's a bummer. Does YouTube, Twitch ever cause you to feel burnt out with hobbying? If so, how do you balance painting for fun versus painting because you are sticking to a schedule? Lately, Twitch has allowed me to paint at least... Twitch is guaranteed that I'm painting probably at least 6 hours a week. I try to paint more, but there are times, specifically over the last couple of months as we've been getting ready to launch the game, where I've been like, I've just not had the time to be able to paint as much. I try to take time. Like, I did some painting, did a good deal of painting yesterday on something that you'll see very soon. And I've done some painting recently. I did a group of independents for Zona Alpha. They're basically dudes in a bunch of different... it's called mop gear, which I always forget what it's for. Something protocol, posture, whatever. Anyway, it's basically like a hazmat suit, but for soldiers. So like as independents, the idea of these folks going in to try to find these treasures in Zona Alpha, like all of their gear kind of matches, but their guns don't. Like some of them are using like M16s and some are using AK-47s. So my idea is that they all went to the same army surplus store and bought like the equipment and then the weapons they got from wherever they got them. So that's why nothing matches. So yeah, I painted those guys up real quick a couple weekends ago. But generally Twitch these days at least is like, well, at least I'm going to paint 6 hours this week. But I want to paint more, So yeah, for me, it's not like oh man, I got to paint. I'm like, oh good, at least I get to do something like that because I'm following a schedule. So I dig that. I enjoy and learn from watching your videos. Well, thank you. I 3D print and sell wargame miniatures. I like MDF Terrain, but I don't like the fact that I don't have any opponents in my area to play wargames against. That is always an issue. One thing that, that you can look at doing is you can become an evangelist, meaning that you are going to hopefully, like with a skirmish game, it's easier for skirmish games because the groups of miniatures are much smaller than like a big army game. But you make 2 warbands, crews, cabals, whatever, and then find people who are interested in tabletop gaming and then be like, hey, you want to try this out, and then play. And then maybe you'll get a convert. Maybe you'll get somebody who'll be like, this is very cool. I want to start making my own stuff, or painting my own things, or I want to get into this game or that game or whatever. But it is a little bit of being proactive, I guess. You know what I mean? And that's sometimes it's a bummer to have to be proactive. You just want to be like, I want to just, it's kind of like being like, well, I just want to watch a movie. I don't want to have to make a movie. Like that's what most of us think, but there are people out there who do want to make movies, and so that works too. I don't know. That's a very good analogy. Anyway, my point is that sometimes you have to be the change you want to see in the world, and so you have to kind of be a bit of an evangelist and get out there and start showing people games, and then maybe you can get a group kind of going. Even if it's a small one. Mission-oriented protective posture. See, yeah, I'm never going to get that right. I don't, because those words don't even. Like mission-oriented protective posture, the only word that makes any sense about basically keeping, biological weapons and stuff like is protective. But mission-oriented, like, that's why I always liked NBC, because it's nuclear, biological, and chemical. That makes sense. I get that. But, it's the military. That's what they do. Zona Alpha is like Stalker, right? Yeah, it's based off of like video games like Stalker and Metro. It's also based off of a novel from the 70s. Called Roadside Picnic, which basically Stalker and Metro were kind of also a little bit based off of too. Let's see here. As a miniature manufacturer and games developer, it's really hard to stay motivated by yourself. It's really good to see you working with a team. I bet you that makes it a lot easier. I mean, it's me and I don't know. If it's just me and Vince, is that a team? I mean, I guess technically we're also working with a couple different artists. And now we've got a copy editor. That's good. And we also worked with Tom, who is the co-host, or it was the co-host. He's currently on a break, but it was the co-host for Warhammer Weekly. If you're familiar with Vince's show on Wednesdays, he was our lead developer, which basically meant like we gave him everything and we're like, okay, now break it, and then he would do a bunch of math and go, okay, well here's a problem and this is a thing and whatever and all that kind of stuff because he's got a PhD, and so but it's a team to some degree, but yeah, it's mainly me and Vince, which is cool. You may have covered this, but what do you think of the Battle Systems Terrain from the UK? I bought a ton of it last fall, and despite its complexity, it looks spectacular. Battle Systems. Is that the stuff from Mantic? Like the different square pieces and stuff, that kind of sci-fi stuff? If it is, I like that stuff. I own a bunch of it, and I built a bunch of it and even painted it. And it's very cool, because I built a bunch of it for when I was originally going to start playing Dead Zone. And then we're going to play Dead Zone, took it to Adepticon. Like painted stuff, painted 2 armies, the Enforcers and the not the Plague. Is it called the Plague? I don't know, the kind of zombie dudes. And then we started sitting down to read the rules, but we were a little drunk, so we didn't really actually play the game. Set it up, looked at it, read the rules, and now there's a new edition, which got rid of the cards, which I think is actually a good deal. And I've not yet got a chance to play that either. I really want to sit down and play a demo of it. I've watched battle reports of Dead Zone. Anyway, my point is if that's the stuff you're talking about, the battle system stuff, I like that terrain. I think it's cool. I mean, it's very modular. It's very, I don't want to say samey, but I painted mine all up to look like, you know what? If you have train tracks in your town, sometimes you're sitting there on the train tracks, not on the train tracks, but waiting for the train. You're trying to drive someplace. I live on the wrong side of the tracks. So there's very frequently I'm stuck behind the train waiting. And all those shipping containers all were like a color. Blue, orange, red, green. But they've been out in the sun for so long that everything's gotten kind of sun bleached. That's how I tried to paint my terrain for those battle systems things, because the idea was these are shipping containers for the colony ship that came here, and then when they landed, they just took them all and used them to make the terrain, the buildings and such like that. Let's see here. Mop will never make sense, and it sucks to run in. It looks warm. It definitely looks warm. 2 is still a team. Well, there you go then. Let's see here. My phone is dying. We're off for food. Thanks, Adam. Absolutely, Tom. Oh, goodness, it's almost 11. I finished the Roadside Picnic audiobook. The book was fantastic, and Robert Forster did an excellent job with the narration. Oh, yeah. No, it was spectacular narration. Definitely, if you're interested in checking out Roadside Picnic, check it out on Audible. Really, really good. Yeah. Battle Systems is the core space people. But then I don't know what that is. I swear the Battle Systems Terrain is what they called the stuff from Mantic, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure if it's romantic, but it's quite beautiful. It's fantasy-based. Well, then that's a totally different thing altogether. I very well enjoy Dead Zone. I think it's among the best tabletop rules created. I think it's cool because it's like you don't have to there's big squares, but it's not like a hex-based game or a grid-based game. But you've got big squares. You still have to position yourself somewhere in there, so maybe you've got cover. But it's just like, this guy moves 3 squares, so you can, but you can stand anywhere in the square, and it actually matters. It's not just like, I move into this square. If there's scattered terrain, you can get behind it, but still be in the square. And so it's kind of basically getting rid of the need for a tape measure is the word I'm looking for. All right, so thank you everybody for coming by. I talked a little bit about MDF here. I hope maybe if you're interested, you check out some of those folks. Those are folks that I've purchased from recently. Not an ad, not sponsored, stuff that I bought. But yeah, it's you can get some cool looking stuff, especially if you take the time to weather it, and if you take the time to maybe even add some little greeblies, a little bit of accoutrement to your MDF. You can get some kind of cool stuff. So thanks again for coming by, and we'll see you in 2 weeks here at live show. The only thing I think in September, for once, the schedule will actually be off because I'll be at a Gen Con during when I was just looking at the calendar earlier. So, but that's a ways away. We don't have to worry about it right now. All right. So anyway, I want to thank you all folks again, and thanks for watching.